Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily. Today's Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. On today's episode of the show, I'm going to talk a little bit about a new documentary called Bogart, Life Comes in Flashes, and I'll present an interview with Stephen Humphrey Bogart, the son of Golden Age movie stars Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. My name is Ben Pearson. I'm an editor at slashfilm.com, and longtime listeners of this podcast know that I've been slowly trying to deepen my cinematic education by going back and watching older movies, which has been an incredibly rewarding pursuit. I would occasionally watch an old classic here and there among all of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s movies that I saw growing up. But in high school, a few friends and I went on a Humphrey Bogart kick. The Maltese Falcon and The Big Sleep were the big ones that really stuck out to us. And to a bunch of 16-year-olds, Bogart became the epitome of cool. He embodied the archetypal film noir detective. He was always ready with a witty response to any situation. He was tough but willing to take a beating. And he knew how to talk to women, which is something that we absolutely did not know how to do at the time. I don't want to turn this into some kind of like kids today speech or anything like that, but I genuinely just do not know if teenage movie fans know who Humphrey Bogart is in 2024. If you're a young listener who is a Bogart fan or the parent of one, maybe, please write in and let me know. But maybe this new documentary will help spread the word about one of the most incredible movie stars this industry has ever seen. Those of us who are fans likely know about the Bogart and Bacall phenomenon when Bogie married his much younger co-star Lauren Bacall, and the two of them pretty much took Hollywood by storm. Their chemistry in To Have and Have Not, the movie where they met for the first time, is off the charts. And I'm always just going to be a sucker for archival footage of the golden age of Hollywood. This documentary, Bogart, Life Comes in Flashes, it provides some of that, and Bacall plays a significant role here. But director Catherine Ferguson, who was behind the Sinead O'Connor documentary called Nothing Compares from a couple years ago, takes an unusual approach to recounting Bogart's story. Instead of focusing primarily on his relationship with Bacall, which is what you might expect a documentarian to do, this cradle-to-the-grave biography examines Bogart through the prism of several key women in his life, including his mother, who was one of the most famous and highest paid illustrators in the country and who really withheld any kind of affection at all from her son. And then Bogart's three other wives as well. I'm not going to spoil any of the details about those relationships, but I really enjoyed this doc. And even though I read a biography of Bogart earlier this year, I still found this to be worth watching. I also want to mention that there's a Bogart-sounding voiceover throughout this movie, and thankfully AI was not used to recreate his voice. The production hired a human actor to do that, so that's just a nice thing to know going into this. This is the type of movie that I love. It made me add a ton of things to my watch list because there are a bunch of clips from several Bogart movies that I still haven't seen. So it was a real joy to be able to watch that stuff and sort of get a taste of what I know that I'm going to be diving into as a viewer. Stephen Humphrey Bogart, the son of Bogart and Bacall, is now 75 years old, and he served as an executive producer on this film. He's been grappling with his family legacy for his entire life. Humphrey died when Stephen was just 8 years old. And Stephen even wrote a book called Bogart in Search of My Father back in 1995, where he tries to learn about the man that he didn't really have a chance to know growing up. I was very excited to talk to Stephen about that legacy, some of the outlandish stories that I've heard about his father, and more. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back with my conversation with Stephen Humphrey Bogart. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. I love both of your parents' work very much, so it's a real thrill to meet you and spend a few minutes talking about them today. Humphrey Bogart's story has been told a lot of different ways over the years, and you've participated in a handful of other documentaries about your parents. And I was wondering why 2024 felt like the right time for a feature film like this.
Well, it wasn't that 2024 felt like the right time. It's that the way the documentary was approached that felt so, that felt it was the time. I wasn't going to do it if it was the same old yada, 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 movie, Bacall, Oscar, death kind of thing. So the unique perspective of this one, looking at his life and his career through the lens of the women in his life, was totally unique. And I thought that I left it up to Catherine because Catherine, this Sinead O'Connor, I don't know if you saw her. Yeah, it was fantastic. So when she came to me with the idea, it was, all right, let's have a go. I didn't know what it was going to end up. I was thinking, it might be kind of boring and stuff, but it's so well done, and it's just not boring at all.
Yeah, it's excellent. So, movies were at the center of culture in this country for decades, but much to my chagrin, that dominance has kind of tapered off in recent years for a bunch of different reasons. I was wondering if you have a sense of how your parents' legacy has evolved over the years and how popular they might still be now.
Oh, that's well. We're hoping to introduce through this new way of telling the story uh, them to my parents again, because frankly, there are a lot of young people who are either looking at their phones or on social media or that type of thing, and they don't really know much about. Like I asked, I went to the, when you're 75, you go to doctors all the time. And was at my doctor's office, and the assistant was like 24 years old. And I said, doctor comes in, have you heard of Humphrey Bogart? No. And I go, well, how about Lauren Bacall? No. Dustin Hoffman? No. Marlon Brando? No. So the younger people are totally out of touch with the golden age of Hollywood because they want to see, explosions and Star Wars and special effects and all that. So I'm hoping through this new lens that they will be interested enough to give it a shot and they will enjoy it and be reintroduced to my father and his films.
Yeah, that's a really great entry point. When it comes to the making of this movie, do you know what Catherine's approach was to sifting through all of the mythology about Bogie that has built up over the years?
Well, I think what she was mainly after was what was the truth. And I had spoken to her last week about this subject, and she wasn't going to go into rumor. She wasn't going to go into innuendo. She wanted to tell the true story and the way his arc through each of the women in his life affected his career and caused his career to progress. So she's the director, and Ellie and George were the producers, and I kind of let them go at it because they gave me the story that they wanted to tell, and I had watched the Sinead O'Connor documentary, and it was so good. I just said, all right, let's give it a shot. Let's see what we come up with because I hope it's good. My imagination was not in high gear at that time, so I couldn't figure out how they were going to do it but she's just tremendous, tremendous director.
So, in terms of all of that mythology that's built up over time, what are some of the wildest stories that you've ever heard about your parents that you know are not true? Are there any that come to mind?
Well, there was the whole book about my father being gay, which I don't think he was. Here I am. I have a sister too. And he'd been married 4 times. I don't know, what mythology? You tell me. What?
Well, I read somewhere that your dad and Peter Lorre once stole a safe and rolled it out into the street in Hollywood, and I read this
Now
story.
that stuff I'm sure is true. That stuff
Okay.
I'm sure is true. Any of the antics and hijinks, I've never heard that one, but any of the antics and hijinks I'm sure were true. But Catherine, I don't think wanted to veer off from the subject matter. So you don't want to get into the minutia. You want to keep the arc going. So I think that I think she stayed away from that sort of stuff, like she stayed away from a lot of different things. She stayed away from the panda story. She stayed away from, there were a number of things that happened in his life that she kind of stayed away from. She didn't, and she kind of glossed over, which I was very happy about, the whole to have and have not thing and Steve and how I was named Steve and all that. It was part of it, but it wasn't a huge part of it because it would have taken away from Helen and Mary Phillips and Mayo and Maud. So I don't think there was room for that kind of minutia.
Right. Yeah. It's a great framing and structure for the movie itself. Yeah. The only other one that I had written down that I read the story about was that he was involved in digging up John Barrymore's corpse as a prank.
Now, I don't
So
know about that one. I'm not sure about that one. That was a little before my time.
yeah,
But did that really happen?
I have no idea. I was curious if you would come across that
Who
because I
was
know
he
that like
with?
oh man I want to say it was Errol Flynn but I don't recall exactly but
That's
yeah
a
you
good
know I
story.
just yeah it is I have to imagine that through the process of writing your book which you wrote many years ago and doing a ton of interviews about your parents over the years that you pretty much know all there is to know about them and their stories but I was wondering if there was anything in this movie that surprised you at all when you saw the final
Well,
cut.
it wasn't the things that surprised me so much. It was the influence that these women had on who he was, because you can see who he was, you can see the arc of his career. And so I think the surprising thing, it's really tough when you go at something from a totally different perspective than you're used to. Because I could say the whole thing was surprising. I mean, it was surprising. I didn't know that Mary Phillips went out to L.A. and he asked her to marry him, and she said no. I got to go back to New York, and you know how Helen and he got together when he was a stagehand, and he was a lowly stagehand. She was a movie star. So I think it was just stuff that I'd never really looked into at all. So the whole thing was to me very interesting and very different, very surprising.
Yeah. As an executive producer and presumably somebody who had some say in the shaping of this movie, was there an under-discussed aspect of your dad's story that you thought would be crucial to be included in this film?
Honestly, no. As executive producer, I was involved in supplying the video, and I did some voiceovers, and I did a lot of interviews. But no, it wasn't me. I wasn't the one who was the influence. I was not going to influence the project at all. That wouldn't have been fair, and I don't think that would have been right. Um,
Hmm.
at some point, you got to let it go, and let it go where it's going to go. And I had enough confidence in Catherine regarding her track record that I was perfectly comfortable of doing that. So no, I was not going to get involved. I was not asked to get involved, and I doubt very much I would have gotten involved. I made a couple of suggestions, but nothing that changed the story at all.
Hmm. Can you tell me a little bit more about the voiceover component? What did you do there and how did that work?
Well, Catherine and Ellie, my producer, actually was my producer. We just had bridges that would that I would put in that would help tell the story, and I would get the writing and I would you know change the verbiage and stuff like that to conform with how I might say something, but I wasn't I didn't know that I was going to do that, but once they suggested I do it, I was fine with it. And as I said, they were bridges, and I thought they worked.
Yeah. After your dad died, your mom needed to resurrect her career, which she had basically put on hold for a little while. And she ended up having this extraordinary career all of her own that lasted all the way up to her death 10 years ago. When you were a teenager or even into adulthood, did you ever offer her any of your own thoughts about whether she should take a certain job? Did you all talk about her career in those terms?
You've never met my mother, obviously.
I didn't.
You wouldn't do that if you had met my mother. No, there's no way that she would not have taken my ideas or anything. Because remember, she left movies, basically. She didn't do many, I mean, she did a lot of movies, but they were secondary movies because she went to the stage, which she really wanted to do. She won a couple of Tony Awards, Applause and Woman of the Year. And so I was never one who, she wouldn't have listened, put it that way. No way. No way.
Fair enough. I will not ask you what your favorite film is that your parents starred in, because I know that you've been asked that an absurd number of times in your life. But I was wondering if you ever talked with your mom about what her favorite film of hers was.
Oh boy. If she had to answer of that she did with my father,
Uh, either
I
either that
think I
or
think if I was to ask her favorite film, I think it would have been How to Marry a Millionaire. But it could have been To Have and Have Not, because that's where she met my father, and that's where the whole arc of her life started. I mean, whereas in the documentary, Mayo helped make my father's career. My father made my mother's career.
Mhm.
So that was an interesting dichotomy in the whole thing.
Yeah, I love that. Is there a common misconception about either your mom or your dad's work that you would like to correct? Any things that you hear all the time where you're like, that's just not right?
You know, I don't hear much about that. Nobody comes to me and disses me about their work at all. I mean, my father's work speaks for itself. And when the AFI came out with its top male and female actresses or movie stars, my father was, of course, number one, but my mother was still number 20, which is phenomenal considering she didn't make that many movies. I mean, she had a short time span that she was working in, but it was about a movie star. So that's really what she was. She was a movie star because of her connection with my father, her marriage to my father, and the whole Bogie and Bacall thing, which just blew up beyond anyone's wildest expectations.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Okay, so my last question for you. Your mom obviously plays a major role in this documentary, but I feel like her life is fascinating enough that there could be a whole documentary just focusing on her. Have you ever had any conversations with anyone who's wanted to try to do that?
Um, no, not really. I mean, there is a documentary there, but the three of us, my brother Sam, my sister Leslie, and I would have to get together and kind of hash it out. And we just haven't had the opportunity, and nobody's really come to us and said that. But I mean, my mother lived a number of lives. She lived she was a movie actress, and then she was a stage star, and she wrote a best-selling book. I did once suggest to my mother that she should run for office. I
What
did.
was her response to that?
No, she didn't want to be, because she was a pretty political type person. Because my father was an activist of sorts when he was in the films, the Lena Horne thing, the Santana productions. So I think that I suggested that she run for office, but we never really talked about her career, or because I didn't have any part in that. She had agents for that.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, well, I'm out of time with you, but thank you so much and congrats on this movie. I loved it, and like I said, I love your parents' work very much. So thank
Thank
you
you
for the
very
time today.
much.
So the movie is called Bogart, Life Comes in Flashes. It's available right now on digital. I highly recommend checking it out. Before we go, though, I just thought this might be a good opportunity to recommend some of my favorite Bogart and Bacall movies. I will start with Bacall first. Stephen mentioned How to Marry a Millionaire as a great one. I absolutely second that. She co-stars with Marilyn Monroe there, and William Powell, who is another one of my favorite actors, plays a supporting role in that film. I also recommend Designing Woman, a rom-com that she stars in opposite Gregory Peck, and the 1974 version of Murder on the Orient Express, which has a tremendous ensemble cast. All four Bogart and Bacall films are worth your time, but if you're only going to check out one or two, I would personally rank them from worst to best in this order: Dark Passage, Key Largo, To Have and Have Not, and The Big Sleep. As for Bogart movies that he did not co star in with Bacall, I'm a big fan of obviously Casablanca, but also High Sierra, The Maltese Falcon, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, In a Lonely Place, and The African Queen. Stay tuned as I continue my ambling quest to watch all of his classics, because I still need to check out things like The Cane Mutiny and The Barefoot Contessa and The Petrified Forest. Ooh, okay, that'll do it for today's episode of the show. You can find more about Bogart and Bacall at slashfilm.com. I'll try to link to a couple things in the show notes as well. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find on the site. You can subscribe to the show on Apple, Overcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns, and mailbag topics to us at bpearson@slashfilm.com. Make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to take a minute to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really helps out a lot. Tell your friends about the show any way you can. Thanks so much for listening.